Negative, K. Nothing further. I'm just
On the morning of December 25th, 2010, Christmas Day, local police received a phone call. A couple had been out for a walk. As they strolled through the lightly wooded area, one of their dogs began to paw and dig at something beneath the fresh snowfall, clearly intrigued by what it had found. As they approached, the couple realized they had come across something deeply troubling and immediately notified police. Law enforcement responded promptly. Based on identifying features and evidence found at the scene, the authorities were able to confirm that the victim was Joanna Yates. Joanna Claire Yates came into the world on the 19th of April, 1985, in the tranquil and picturesque county of Hampshire, located in the south of England. She was born into a well-established and respected family, the second child of David and Teresa Yates. Joanna grew up in an environment filled with love, warmth, and a strong emphasis on education and personal growth. Her parents both held prominent roles in the business world, occupying high-ranking managerial positions in reputable companies. Their successful careers provided the Yates household with a stable and affluent lifestyle, allowing Joanna and her older brother, Christian, to benefit from opportunities that nurtured their academic and personal development from an early age. As a child, Joanna displayed a gentle demeanor and an inquisitive mind. She excelled in school, showing a particular aptitude for design and creative thinking. Teachers described her as bright, determined, and consistently kind to others. She pursued her education with purpose and later attended university, where she earned a degree in landscape architecture, an area that blended her passion for design, nature, and innovation. Joanna's ambition was not fueled by competition, but rather by a genuine desire to contribute meaningfully to the spaces people inhabit. Her vision was always rooted in harmony, beauty, and functionality. In 2008, a new chapter in Joanna's life began when she met Greg Reardon, a young, talented engineer working in the same industry. Greg, just 2 years her senior, was intelligent, driven, and shared many of Joanna's values and aspirations. The two met through mutual colleagues during a professional event and quickly formed a connection that blossomed into a romantic relationship. Within a matter of months, their bond deepened, and it became clear to both that they had found something special in each other. They decided to move in together the following year, choosing to build their relationship gradually and thoughtfully, without rushing into marriage. Their relationship was built on mutual respect, shared goals, and a deep emotional connection. Though they weren't officially married or engaged, Greg and Joanna were planning their future carefully. They discussed their dreams of home ownership and a meaningful wedding celebration, and were diligently saving money while advancing in their respective careers. In the autumn of 2010, an exciting opportunity arose that would alter the course of their lives. Joanna received a job offer from a highly regarded architectural and construction firm based in Bristol. The offer represented a significant step forward in her professional journey, and she accepted it enthusiastically. Greg, supportive as always, arranged for a transfer within his company to a Bristol branch, ensuring they could remain together as they transitioned to a new city. By mid-October of that year, the couple had settled into a modest but charming apartment on the ground floor of a well-maintained 2-story home located in a peaceful and family-friendly neighborhood of Bristol. The setting was serene and suburban, ideal for young professionals like themselves. The building's upper level was occupied by the landlord, Christopher Jeff, a retired teacher known around the neighborhood for his quiet demeanor and reclusive habits. Another young couple, also recent arrivals to the area, occupied the other ground floor unit adjacent to Joanna and Greg's. The couple quickly set about transforming their new living space into a welcoming home. They added personal touches, photographs, cozy furnishings, and holiday decorations that reflected their excitement about spending their first Christmas in their new home. It was a time of hopeful beginnings and holiday anticipation. On Friday, December 17, 2010, the calm routine of their life was unexpectedly disrupted. Greg had planned a weekend trip to Sheffield to visit his family and spend a few days with his parents before the holiday rush. Joanna, meanwhile, chose to stay in Bristol, intending to finish wrapping presents, prepare for Greg's return, and catch up with friends. She had mentioned her plans to meet colleagues for drinks after work to celebrate the approaching holidays and unwind after a busy week. That evening, Joanna followed through with her plans. She joined her friends at a nearby bar where the atmosphere was festive and relaxed. Laughter echoed over the clinking of glasses, and conversations drifted between work topics and holiday excitement. Joanna appeared happy and engaged, enjoying the time spent with people she trusted. At approximately 8 p.m., she said her goodbyes, mentioning that she wanted to pick up something for dinner before heading home for the night. Surveillance footage from a local supermarket later confirmed that she stopped in to purchase a ready-made pizza and a couple of beverages, simple comforts for a quiet evening in. After completing her purchase, she exited the store alone and began making her way home. She called Greg around this time, telling him she had just left the store and would message him again before bed. That would be the last time anyone heard directly from her. Over the weekend, Greg tried several times to reach Joanna by phone and text. Though he grew increasingly uneasy, he initially assumed that signal issues or a low phone battery might be the cause of her silence. The area they lived in occasionally experienced reception problems, and Joanna had mentioned feeling tired. Perhaps she had simply turned in early or was preoccupied with errands. But by Sunday afternoon, Greg's concern turned into deep worry. He drove back to Bristol, arriving in the early evening. Upon entering their apartment, a wave of unease washed over him. The front door, which Joanna was always meticulous about locking, was ajar. Inside, the home was eerily quiet. Her handbag, keys, and wallet were in their usual places near the entrance. Her phone lay face down on the living room couch, its battery depleted but untouched since the last use. Their cat, normally lively and well cared for, appeared agitated and noticeably hungry, signs that it hadn't been fed in a couple of days. Joanna's shoes and winter coat remained by the door, suggesting she hadn't left the house after returning that night. Her car, too, was still parked in the driveway, unmoved. Nothing had been visibly disturbed, yet everything felt strangely off, as if time had paused the moment she walked through the door. Fearing something was genuinely wrong, Greg contacted several of Joanna's close friends and her parents. Each call confirmed his worst fears. No one had heard from her since Friday evening. With rising anxiety, he contacted the police and filed a missing person report. The investigation began swiftly. Authorities conducted a full search of the property, spoke with neighbors, and worked to establish a detailed timeline of Joanna's final known movements. They confirmed that she had been at work that Friday and had gone out with colleagues to a local bar afterward. Surveillance footage from the bar and the supermarket corroborated her movements up to a certain point. She had indeed purchased a meal and drinks shortly before heading home. Joanna Yates is believed to have returned home sometime around 9 p.m. that Friday evening, following a cheerful gathering with friends and colleagues. Text message records later confirmed that shortly after arriving, she engaged in casual conversations with a few close friends, chatting about the upcoming Christmas party they had all been planning together. The tone of the messages was upbeat and lighthearted. There was no indication that anything was wrong or that Joanna felt uneasy. Inside the apartment, signs of her routine were immediately visible. The kitchen revealed a quiet domestic scene. The oven had been used, a pizza box was missing, a plate had been placed neatly on the counter, and 2 chilled bottles of beer sat waiting on the table. One of the bottles had been opened, though barely touched. Only a small amount had been consumed. It appeared that Joanna had been preparing for a simple, peaceful evening at home, likely intending to enjoy her dinner, relax, and perhaps watch a bit of television or continue wrapping holiday gifts. But something happened, something unexplainable, abrupt, and completely outside the normal rhythm of her life. The apartment showed no signs of chaos or disarray. There were no broken locks, no shattered glass, and no damage to suggest forced entry. There were also no obvious signs of a confrontation or physical disturbance. Her valuables, cash, bank cards, electronic devices, remained untouched and in their usual places. Based on this, investigators quickly ruled out robbery as a potential motive. A particularly curious detail drew their attention. Although the plate and cutlery had been set out, there was no trace of the pizza. It had been purchased according to the receipt, and the oven had clearly been used. Yet the packaging was not found in the trash, and no remnants of the meal were discovered in the home. It was as if that part of the evening had been interrupted before it could fully unfold. The napkin, utensils, and clean plate seemed frozen in time, mute evidence of a meal that never happened. Near the front door, Joanna's purse and keys had been placed as usual. Among the items on the small table was the receipt from the supermarket where she had stopped after leaving the bar. The timestamp confirmed she had bought the pizza and drinks at approximately 8:30 p.m., aligning with what her friends and Greg already knew. Authorities launched a formal search operation on Monday, December 20th. With each hour that passed, urgency grew. Joanna was not the type of person to disappear without informing anyone. Her family, friends, and partner all described her as reliable, responsible, and deeply considerate. For her to be missing, without communication, without reason, was completely out of character. Detectives carefully retraced her last known movements. They examined footage from traffic and security cameras between the supermarket and her residence. The recordings confirmed she had driven herself home, alone. There were no indications that anyone followed her vehicle, nor did she appear to make any unplanned stops. Investigators meticulously reviewed the footage, but found nothing overtly suspicious. Parallel to the search efforts, investigators began the process of interviewing people in Joanna's life, starting with those closest to her. As is standard protocol in missing person cases, special attention was given to her romantic partner. Greg Reardon, understandably devastated and anxious, fully cooperated with police. Given his proximity to the situation, he was initially treated as a person of interest, not because of suspicion, but because statistical data often points to someone close to the victim in such cases. Detectives needed to ensure they could confirm his whereabouts beyond all doubt. Greg had told authorities he had left for Sheffield that Friday evening to visit his parents for the weekend. This claim was supported by multiple verifiable details. He had worked a full day before departing for the drive north. Along the way, he had stopped at a service station along the motorway. The transaction was confirmed by a time-stamped receipt from approximately 9 p.m. Further confirmation came from his family. By 9:30 p.m., he had arrived at his parents' home. His presence there throughout the weekend was consistently corroborated by his relatives. Investigators conducted a thorough check and found no indication that he had returned to Bristol during that time. With his alibi confirmed, Greg was officially cleared from the list of suspects. 5 days passed with no sign of Joanna. As Christmas approached, the atmosphere around the case became more tense and heartbreaking. Her family remained in Bristol, clinging to hope, while volunteers distributed flyers and posters. The story received growing attention from the media, with news channels covering the case and encouraging members of the public to come forward with any information, no matter how minor it might seem. Then on the morning of December 25th, 2010, Christmas Day, a call was placed to local authorities that would shift the nature of the investigation entirely. A couple had been walking their 2 dogs along a quiet, snow-dusted trail near a wooded area in the Phelan district, approximately 3 miles from Joanna's apartment. One of their pets began to dig curiously at something beneath the fresh layer of snow. As they approached, the couple realized they had come across something deeply troubling and immediately notified police. Law enforcement responded promptly. When they arrived at the scene, they began a careful, methodical process to investigate what had been discovered. Based on identifying features and evidence found at the scene, the authorities were able to confirm that the victim was Joanna Yates. With this discovery, the case evolved from a missing person inquiry to a criminal investigation focused on finding the responsible party. The priority for law enforcement shifted to locating and apprehending whoever had taken Joanna's life. Given the complexity of the case and the public attention it had garnered, experienced investigators from across the region, some with backgrounds in major crime investigations, were assigned to assist. A coordinated task force was established to explore every possible angle and to ensure that no detail would be overlooked. Media coverage intensified, but police remained cautious, choosing to release information strategically to avoid jeopardizing the investigation. They appealed to the public for tips and asked local residents to report anything unusual they may have noticed in the days around Joanna's disappearance. Despite interviews with neighbors, no one reported hearing strange sounds or seeing anything out of the ordinary. The lack of eyewitnesses complicated the search for answers, but investigators were determined. One area of particular interest was the building in which Joanna lived. As part of a routine canvassing of nearby residents, officers spoke with everyone in the surrounding apartments. It was during this process that they turned their attention to another tenant in the building, Vincent Tabak, a 32-year-old engineer who shared one of the ground floor units with his partner, 28-year-old Tanya. Tanya had spent that particular Friday night attending a corporate holiday celebration hosted by her employer. Vincent, Tanya's partner, stated that he had stayed home that night. According to him, he spent the evening resting and hadn't planned to leave the apartment until he received a call from Tanya asking for a ride. He picked her up around 2 a.m., several hours after Joanna was last seen. In his initial statement to the police, Vincent downplayed any connection to his neighbors. He claimed he barely knew Joanna or Greg, stating that while he had occasionally seen them in passing and exchanged brief pleasantries, there had never been any substantial interaction between them. Across the street from the building Joanna and Greg lived in, a separate gathering was also taking place. A group of young people had organized a house party that Friday night, inviting numerous friends to what became a lively event with loud music, laughter, and general commotion. According to several attendees interviewed by detectives, many of them had been drinking and were focused entirely on the party atmosphere, paying little attention to what was happening beyond the property. However, a few guests who stepped out onto the balcony around 9:30 p.m. to smoke recalled hearing something strange. While they couldn't agree on the exact nature of the sound, they collectively remembered hearing what seemed like a woman's scream. At the time, it hadn't stood out. It could have been anything, a loud conversation or even a prank. But in hindsight, that moment became an important timestamp in the timeline investigators were assembling. As detectives worked to identify everyone connected to Joanna's life and surroundings, one person naturally drew attention: Christopher Jeff, the 63-year-old landlord of the building. Jeff was a retired school teacher known to most of his tenants as a quiet and reclusive figure. He lived on the upper floor of the house and had owned the property for years. While neighbors described him as eccentric, there was nothing about him that had ever raised concerns prior to Joanna's disappearance. Nonetheless, as part of routine procedure, the police interviewed Jeff multiple times. During a second round of questioning, they noted a subtle shift in his demeanor. He seemed more uneasy and distracted than before, although he remained cooperative and willingly answered all their questions. Jeff stated that on the night in question, he had followed his usual schedule, attending a workout session at a local gym, which he frequented several times per week. According to him, he returned home around 9 p.m., locked his door, and went to bed not long afterward. He emphasized that he neither saw nor heard anything unusual that evening. However, when detectives asked for more detail, Jeff suddenly recalled something he hadn't mentioned in his previous interview. As he was walking home from the gym, he said he had noticed 3 young men loitering near the front of the house. He described them as unfamiliar, noting that he had never seen them in the area before. At the time, he hadn't given it much thought, but given the circumstances, he now considered it potentially relevant. Meanwhile, Vincent Tabak offered a slightly different timeline when asked to recall the events of that Friday. He told detectives that he had actually left the house twice that evening, once shortly after 9 p.m. to run a brief errand at a local shop, and again at around 2 a.m. to pick up Tanya from her company's party. According to Tabak, when he first stepped outside around 9 o'clock, he noticed that Jeff's vehicle was parked in the driveway in its usual position. But when he returned with Tanya several hours later, the vehicle was still in the driveway, only now it was parked facing the opposite direction. This subtle but telling detail suggested that Jeff's car had been moved during the period he claimed to have been asleep, contradicting his earlier statement to police. Adding another layer to the puzzle, Greg Reardon recalled a brief interaction he had with Jeff earlier that same day before leaving town for the weekend. Greg had informed Jeff that he would be away visiting family in Sheffield and mentioned, perhaps casually, perhaps with slight concern, that Joanna would be home alone for the next few days. This moment, in hindsight, carried far more weight. It meant Jeff was fully aware that Joanna would be by herself in the apartment that evening, a fact that led police to scrutinize his movements more closely. On December 30th, nearly 2 weeks after Joanna was last seen, Christopher Jeff was arrested. A full search of his apartment and personal belongings was conducted. Despite his visible discomfort during questioning, Jeff continued to assert his innocence, and insisted that he had no knowledge of or involvement in what had happened to Joanna. During the search, officers collected several items of interest, including a pair of shoes with faint brown stains on them. These were sent to a laboratory for forensic testing. Investigators also collected a DNA sample from Jeff for comparison against evidence obtained during the post-discovery analysis of Joanna's clothing and belongings. After a detailed analysis, results revealed that the brown stains on the shoes were not blood or any other biologically significant material. They were, in fact, simple surface dirt. More importantly, the DNA sample from Jeff did not match any of the genetic traces found on Joanna. With no physical evidence connecting him to the crime, and after extensive investigation, Jeff was officially cleared as a suspect and released from custody. The focus of the case now shifted dramatically. With Jeff ruled out, detectives began looking more closely at Vincent Tabak, who until this point had been considered only a witness or peripheral figure. Unlike Jeff, Tabak's movements on the night in question weren't independently verified. Furthermore, certain details he had provided in his earlier statements did not hold up under closer scrutiny. Investigators began to notice that Tabak had subtly attempted to redirect attention toward Jeff on multiple occasions, often offering unsolicited theories about his landlord's behavior. Then came a more concerning observation. When Tabak was brought in for formal questioning, detectives noticed what appeared to be a series of small, faint scratches on the side of his neck, injuries that looked consistent with light defensive contact. When asked how he had sustained them, Tabak gave an explanation that was vague and unsatisfactory. He claimed they were from working around the house, but did not elaborate. When asked again about his neighbors, Tabak repeated his earlier claim that he didn't know them well. He maintained that he and Joanna had never interacted beyond a casual hello, and that their paths rarely crossed due to their respective schedules. The turning point came when detectives requested a DNA sample from Tabak for comparison. He became visibly uneasy, hesitating before responding. Eventually, he agreed to provide the sample, but with an unusual caveat. He stated that he may have inadvertently entered Greg and Joanna's apartment at some point when they weren't home. According to him, he had mistakenly wandered into the wrong unit while it was unoccupied. Despite initial resistance, authorities lawfully obtained a DNA sample from Vincent Tabak. The lab report revealed a partial match between Tabak's DNA and biological material recovered from Joanna Yates's clothing. This revelation eliminated any lingering doubts about his status in the case. On January 11, 2011, law enforcement moved decisively. Tabak was placed under arrest and taken into custody for questioning. In addition to the DNA evidence, technicians identified microscopic fibers within the vehicle and in Tabak's apartment that matched the composition and coloration of the shirt Joanna had been wearing the night she disappeared. These threads further supported the theory that an encounter, far beyond accidental, had taken place between the two inside or near Tabak's environment. With this mounting body of evidence, prosecutors acted swiftly. 2 days after his arrest on January 13th, Vincent Tabak was formally charged with first-degree homicide. The charges were filed based on physical evidence, contradictions in his previous statements, and behavioral indicators noted during interviews. Over the following weeks, detectives constructed what they believed to be the true sequence of events. According to their theory, Vincent Tabak had developed a persistent and unhealthy fascination with Joanna Yates. He had likely observed her patterns over time and may have been aware of her routines. On the morning of December 17th, when he overheard Greg Reardon mention to the landlord that he would be out of town for the weekend and that Joanna would be alone, Tabak may have seen an opportunity. Later that evening, once he saw Joanna return home, Tabak allegedly approached her under false pretenses, perhaps to ask for help, borrow something, or make casual conversation. Investigators believe he gained her trust momentarily, enough for her to let him inside. What happened next, they argue, was not an accident, but a deliberate and calculated assault. In October 2011, after months of pretrial proceedings and ongoing forensic analysis, Vincent Tabak's trial officially began. On October 28, 2011, the jury returned a verdict. Vincent Tabak was found guilty of first-degree homicide. The judge, citing the manipulative and calculated nature of the crime, issued a sentence of life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole only after serving a minimum of 20 years.